Welcome to this short introduction to our limit system. The Risk Control Limit System is a specialized application that evaluates limits, for instance for transaction authorization purposes, computes headroom, and then delivers these calculations via web services to other systems. Offering considerable flexibility in the specification and management of limits, the system can provide real-time visibility of limits to downstream systems and business users, often providing enhanced flexibility defining limits. The framework gives risk professionals the tools they need to manage complex limits across multiple origination and database systems. The system is implemented around a central REST server, limit engine, with associated data connectors and interfaces. Business users working within multiple origination systems may query limits from the central application. The system may be integrated with multiple data sources in a highly flexible fashion.
What actually is a limit? Well, let's assume this imaginary portfolio. Each column represents a variable, and each row stands for one exposure of this portfolio. To define a limit, we first need to declare the amount variable used for the aggregation. In this example, there are two columns that can be used for this purpose, which are net exposure and gross exposure. For now, we will stick to net exposure. Next, we need to define the filter for our limit. Using the variable client country, we can create a simple limit for Germany, which would mean summing up the net exposure amount for all exposures contained in the portfolio which have the client country set to Germany. Another possibility may be to create limits on the type of entity for banks and financial institutions to avoid increased risks caused by a high concentration on a particular type of entity. Also, there are multiple types of limits that can be defined, which can basically be divided into two groups, namely value limits and ratio limits. Value limits define a fixed limit amount on exposures that fulfill conditions the limits are based on. Simple value limits define fixed limit amounts on particular values, for instance on a specific client or country. Complex limits with additional filtering define fixed limit amounts on a certain subset of your exposures, for instance, all clients of the same type or a defined range of types. Limits for all banks and financial institutions in a certain country could serve as an example. Ratio limits, on the other hand, define limits as a proportion of the summed-up exposure amounts defined by a filter, which are employed for the definition of concentration limits. For instance, we could create limits based on country grades that must not exceed a certain proportion of the entire portfolio amount. Additionally, overrides allow temporary, time-limited modifications to limits to allow deviations under certain circumstances. The activation and deactivation of limits and overrides can, of course, be scheduled to happen at a certain point in the future. In order to keep data consistent, the limit system uses lookup data containing the allowed values for the different variables, like client references and names, countries, sectors, and whatever your portfolio may offer to be used for limit creation. On top of that, these lookups are also used to assign data which is not contained in the exposures themselves, like the ratings of countries, categorization of clients, and more. Based on this information, limit creation rules offer a flexible and dynamic way to create limits automatically in the background. Here we can see the creation of a rule that is supposed to create limits based on the entity type of a client. That means whenever a client is modified or added, so is the limit for this client according to the limit creation rule.
How does it all work? The limit system consists of two required components, which are the limit engine and the limit designer. The limit manager we have used before is optional, but a useful addition if the integration of a UI within an existing backend system is not possible or needs time for implementation. We have already seen Limit Manager before. Apart from requesting limits based on the given criteria, we can also monitor existing limits. Each tab represents a limit group that has been created in Limit Designer before. Limit Designer is a user-friendly web-based component that allows one to create and manage your limits. As can be seen here, the limits we have requested before can be found in this overview. Active limits are those which are available for requests, whereas pending limits are those limits that have an activation date in the future. The limit engine receives data update requests from the back-end system. This could be your company's underwriting system, for example. As we have seen, the risk control limit system is easily able to adapt to existing environments and flexible in the way existing data can be handled and limits can be created. Through the use of REST services sending and receiving JSON messages, it is also highly integrable into any environment. This includes data feeds for exposures and lookups, as well as requesting limits based on the attributes of exposures. The microservice architecture allows building scalable systems that can adapt according to the given environment, the volume of data to be processed, responsiveness, etc. Also, the concept of using data connectors also allows rule-based transformations between endpoints, so that no code changes are necessary to adopt connectors to any data source provided by an integrating customer. The limit system can run as a standalone system on a server within your network, or as a container-based cloud service. As data sources at the time being the system supports Oracle, Microsoft SQL Server, and PostgreSQL.
We hope you enjoyed this video. If you would like more information, please do not hesitate to get in touch with us. Thanks for watching.